Okay, this is a bit, I don't know, gotta adjust things a little bit here, sorry about that. Hi, David Ansel, Dancing Bear here. Got a little bit witchy music on. These videos are way overdue. There were some scheduling problems. I won't go into details. I involved roommates and so forth, and having a place to myself. I like to do these when I have a place to myself. So anyway, greetings. Happy New Year 2013. Promises to be a very witchy year. I'll get into that some other time. And basically this is about the new moon. And before we start talking about the new moon, I'm going to talk about the full moon. And I'm going to talk about some other references, some basic differences between science and metaphysics. The full moon, as I've noted before, I've mentioned this before, if you're going to do a full moon ritual, you better make sure you're doing it on the right night. Or you need to make sure you're doing it the right night, because you need to be in the flow of nature, the time closest to the full moon. Now, if you want to get technical, really, from a scientific standpoint, the moon is only full for a second or two. The moon is only a new moon, or a dark moon, rather. We'll be getting into that for a second or two. Just like when there's a total eclipse of the sun. You know, it keeps growing and growing and gets darker and darker, and then there's that moment when it's total. It's only a brief moment. So technically speaking, scientifically speaking, the moon is either waning or waxing, because it's only at the opposite poles, darker or full, for a second or two. So that's something to always think about when you're working with the moon. And when you're working with a full moon, when you look at the calendar, you take out your calendar and you open it up and it says, oh, the full moon's on this date. No, it's not. For instance, I'm in the Pacific time zone. This is a perfect example of what's coming up here, because I have it noted here in my little pocket schedule calendar. Right here, the 26th. The 27th, it says full moon. It doesn't say when. I always tell people get a calendar that has the time on it. That's not always accurate either. Because it says full moon. It actually does have the time on it, so I take that back. 4:40 UT. For those of you who don't know what UT is, it stands for Universal Time. It's what we used to call Greenwich Mean Time. It's not 4:40 a.m. Pacific Time. There's an 8-hour difference between Pacific Standard Time and Universal Time. We are 8 hours behind. You have to subtract 8 hours if you're in the Pacific time zone. You subtract, if you're in Eastern time zone in the United States, you subtract 5 hours. If you're in daylight savings time, you have to add another hour to that. So if in the Pacific time zone, we would subtract 9 hours. So 4:40 a.m. on Sunday the 27th is the full moon. Well, that would make it 8:40 p.m. 26th. Now, let's think for a moment, too. Let's say it were 4:40 a.m. Would you celebrate it on the night of the 27th? Well, no, you shouldn't. It's still dark at 4:40 a.m. The sun hasn't come up yet. That means the full moon is still in the period of nightfall between sunset on Saturday the 26th and sunrise on Sunday the 27th. So that's what you got to remember, is technically, at midnight we go to a new day according to our calendar system. And so if the full moon is at 12:30 a.m., you're not going to celebrate. Yes, technically, yes, it is the next day, but if you celebrate the next night, you've already missed it. You're already in the waning stage of the full moon. So you really missed it. And once again, for practical reasons, like I said, when we're talking the science of the full moon being dark and so forth, excuse me, I just had to check the time for a second. Or we're talking about the full moon being lasting a second. Those are scientific terms. Those are astronomical terms. We have to look at it from a metaphysical standpoint if we're going to work with that energy. We do want to be, aware of what time it is and so forth, so we know if we're working with waxing energy or waning energy. But still, you got to have some night to actually call it a full moon ritual. It's for practical reasons, and you are still staying with the flow of nature, of course. Another example is if we're going to talk about the elements, we always talk about, in the Western sense, it's earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. If you're looking at the Chinese, the air, fire, water, metal, and wood. 5 elements. Well, you talk to a scientist about that, they're going to look at you like you're nuts. The elements are what's on the periodic table. And granted, if we're going to work with the elements, we're not working with the periodic table. So don't say, well, you need to be scientific about it. No, because we're not. We're metaphysical. We're talking metaphysics here. And that's what this is about. So, what does this have to do with the dark moon? Well, I did some research recently because I keep seeing these people doing new moon rituals. And it's not what I was taught in my studies, what the new moon is about. New moon in Wicca is also known as a dark moon. It's the opposite. The full moon is for bringing things to completion and fulfillment. The dark moon is for banishing. And, well, but that's not quite it. It's usually the waning moon is for banishing, and if you really want a good banishing spell, it should be right before the dark moon. And right, like the waning dark moon, right before it. That's the prime time. If you look in double checking those books, they confirm the dark moon is for meditation. It's to explore our own darkness, our own shadow selves. It's inward time to go inward a little bit on that night. But yeah, I see all these people, they're not Wiccans, it's New Age people, and some of them are shamans, doing a new moon ritual where you actually plant the seed for your thoughts and beginnings. I thought, well, that's the opposite of what we do in Wicca. You're supposed to banish, not plant. So why is that? And I'm finding also some of these shamanic traditions not all tribal cultures really talked about the moon that much, or considered the moon that much. Some were more solar oriented. And so I don't know how it came about, this new moon stuff coming in. But I did find this. Although astronomers consider back up. I'm sorry. The dark moon and the new moon are not, I repeat, not the same thing. Astronomers refer to it, the dark moon, as the new moon, and astronomically speaking, that is correct. However, metaphysically speaking, it is not correct. I'm going to read something a little bit here. The original meaning of the phrase new moon was the first visible crescent of the moon after the conjunction with the sun. This takes place over the western horizon in the brief period between sunset and moonset, and therefore the precise time and even the date of the appearance of the new moon by this definition will be influenced by the geographical location. Of course, it's always influenced by geographical location. The astronomical new moon, sometimes known as the dark moon, to avoid confusion, occurs by definition at the moment of conjunction in ecliptical longitude with the sun, when the moon is invisible from the earth. So, there you have it. Not one and the same. If you want to do a new moon ritual, you should be doing it after the dark moon. This calendar will say the new moon. It is not the new moon. It is the dark moon. New moon's going to be another day away, at least. Perhaps 24 hours or so. Now, I know there are some people who are going to say, well, do what you feel is right and go with you. Oh, yeah, you can do that if you want, but, we're talking nature here. Nature doesn't bend to your will. You're supposed to go with the flow of nature. If you really want things to work well, if you want your energy to work well, if you want your magic to do well, you work with the flow of energy, not against it. Now, also, I've heard some people say you can release during the full moon. That's not what the full moon is for. But I've heard some people say, well, you want to release the negative things that have come with it. Well, you should do that on the waning side of the full moon at the earliest. Because of that, you're fighting against nature. It's like swimming upstream. You're not going to get very far. If you got a strong current, you're not going to get very far. You're swimming against the current. So, just want to bring this to light. This is not an opinion. This is fact. What is referred to on calendars as the new moon is not the new moon. It is the dark moon. Food for thought. Peace and love, and have a great day and a great year. Another video coming up probably tomorrow. That one's going to be of a little bit more political nature. Take care. Namaste and blessed be.